Hey guys, so for this video, I'm gonna summarize a lot of things I already talked about on Shane's live stream, but I'm also gonna get into fractals a little bit too. So um, if you're already familiar with the two singularities and how the retrocausality language talks to us from the future, I'll put a time marker in the description so you can just click on that to get to the new stuff. But I think it's worth mentioning these things again for anyone who's new. So I guess I need to start out by defining what retrocausality is. Retrocausality is when the future affects the past. So it's when something happens in the future that has such a profound effect on consciousness that it ripples back into its past, which is our present, and influences today's events in just the right way to create a scenario where we end up merging with that thing in the future that's rippling back to us, if that makes sense. Now, technically, we could also say it rippled back beyond our present day to influence all of human history, but I'm trying to keep things simple, so we'll just focus on how the stuff happening in our present day is a result of the singularity that happened in the future. And there's actually two singularities happening alongside each other at the same time right now. That's why the world seems so polarized right now. And both singularities have created their own self sustaining time loop that we're living in. Like, we think this is just regular life, but our whole life has actually been taking place inside of a time loop. And it's either a negative time loop or a positive time loop, depending on which singularity we're talking about. Now, from a higher perspective, time is an illusion because everything is happening in God's now. But from our linear human perspective, the concept of retrocausality, I think it helps us to better understand what's really going on. So basically, what's going on is there's two singularities, the technological singularity and the spiritual singularity. Now, some people will merge with the AI hive mind through the DNA transhumanism of the tech singularity. And some people, a much smaller number, will merge with the Christ consciousness of the spiritual singularity. And I say will merge, but it's already happened. Like, there's no turning back now. We can see the exponential growth in technology around us, and that's not a coincidence. And they want to rub it in our face, but the original singularity is the spiritual singularity, and it's totally impossible to fully describe accurately with human words or concepts. The best I can do is say it's when some of us experience an altered state of consciousness when we merge with Christ consciousness. It's a state where we're able to feel God's unconditional love. Like it's we say that it's an emotion, but it's so much more than an emotion. Like, it's an actual altered state of consciousness, and in that altered state of consciousness, you can feel God's unconditional love, like in a tangible way that's undeniable and indescribable. So, the spiritual singularity, it's like a magnet that exists in the future that's pulling us towards it. That's why I say the spiritual singularity already happened. There's a part of us that already exists in that future, and from the perspective of our higher self, you could say we've already merged with the singularity. I mean, the spiritual singularity, because our higher self is already fully merged with it. But from the linear perspective of our earthly human selves, it feels like we're accelerating towards something that hasn't happened yet. But it's that acceleration itself that's being caused by the fact that it's already happened. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to pull us towards it. So it's like one big circle or time loop. And, as we continue to accelerate towards the spiritual singularity, the waves of Christ consciousness are only going to increase in intensity and duration. Like, some of us are already starting to experience the waves of Christ consciousness that come and go. Really, it's so powerful that I don't think it could happen all at once, because, it'd be too much of a shock to our system. I think it's a process that's gonna span years. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is the negative time loop of the technological singularity. All these quote unquote advancements with computers and nanotech, and even the Industrial Revolution, they're all a result of the tech singularity rippling back from the future to influence the invention of those things. And I know this is a dark topic, but I really want to make it clear for anyone who's new. The tech singularity, it's not people merging with metal nuts and bolts robots. Like, the tech singularity is on a DNA level. The transhumanism is caused by nanotech that gets into the body and manipulates someone's mind to merge with the AI hive mind. It knows that mind manipulation leads to consciousness manipulation. And the nanotech is like a parasite that attaches itself to humans. Sounds like a movie, yes, I know. At this point, because of the chemtrails, we all already have a little bit of nanotech in our body. But I think the people with Morgellons disease are rejecting it more than the average person. Now, keep in mind, they've sprayed us from so far away that it's not concentrated enough. I don't think it's not concentrated enough to prevent us from using our mind to think about God and connect to God. I don't think it can manipulate someone's consciousness if they're fully connected to God. But I do think the CV Vax is on a whole nother level. I think unless someone literally has superhuman DNA, I think it's going to manipulate the RNA of DNA and fuse people with the AI hive mind. They openly admit that it manipulates the RNA of DNA. That's just what they're willing to admit. We're already seeing it happening. The mainstream lied to us. They lied to us all about what the tech singularity is, to hide the fact that it's about taking over people's DNA. Do not get that vax, no matter how many people try to say they had zero side effects. Even if they don't have any negative side effects with their body, and a lot of them won't, their mind is what's going to be affected. Once they merge with the AI hive mind, they'll keep going about their lives acting like nothing happened. But we'll get through this. In the end, the tech singularity will only serve as a catalyst to get us to merge with the spiritual singularity that much quicker. It's actually helping to create a scenario where Earth's one collective consciousness has to divide into two collective consciousnesses. So you could think of Earth as a cell dividing and going through mitosis. Not physically, but like a spiritual mitosis. And, some people will stay with the old cell, and other people will live on the new earth cell. And, if there's no external world that exists independent from consciousness, then it only makes sense that as more people merge with the AI hive mind, the people who don't merge with it will have no other choice but to form their own collective consciousness. I think it happens naturally, just like cell division is a natural process. And I think that new collective consciousness will still exist in the same space as the old one, but it'll be separate from that artificial collective consciousness that's not rooted in love. I really think New Earth is new consciousness. And like I said, I don't think this Earth cell division is going to be an instant thing. So, like, we'll still live alongside all those people who merge with the tech singularity. And all those people connected to the AI hive mind will continue on with their life, acting as if nothing happened. But as that masquerade is going on, we'll continue on with our day-to-day lives too. But the difference is we'll be in an altered state of consciousness that's just drenched in the unconditional love of Christ consciousness. So it won't even matter to us that everyone around us is fused to the hive mind. It won't matter that the AI uses their bodies to talk to us, because we'll be connected to God's love and our higher collective consciousness. I know at this point it sounds impossible, but it just won't bother us that the world as we know it has passed away. So, earlier I said the retrocausality language communicates to us from the future. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but at the end of this video, I'm going to put 2 exercises up so you can tune into the retrocausality language yourself. Like, please do not take my word for it. The best evidence is through your own personal experience. But for anyone who's new, basically the retrocausality language is it's an advanced form of communication that comes from the future. Now, music and synchronicities seem to be a big part of it, but it's not limited to only music and synchronicities. It uses many different means to try to get our attention. And like I was telling Shane, some people think it's our higher self sending the messages back to us from the future, and some people think it's God. I think it's a combination of both. It's a language that's used to try to describe the indescribable. And the spiritual singularity definitely falls into that category. God, Christ consciousness, all those things are impossible to accurately describe using human words the way we do. But see, the retrocausality language is so advanced that it uses archetypes to get a message across. I mean, it's so intelligent. It can use things like archetypes in music to reflect the evolution of your soul. So, an archetype, what that is that's a unit or container that holds encoded information, usually in the form of multiple symbols and metaphors. I think an archetype is more powerful than a symbol just because it can hold more information. So it has the ability to communicate knowledge that's more complete than what you'd find in a single symbol, if that makes sense. And one archetype that keeps popping up for a lot of people in the community is the consciousness arc. So, like songs that talk about the ocean or rivers or like sailing or ships, those are all references to the consciousness arc. Because all those bodies of water they're like a metaphor for the God ocean. You could think of all of us as drops of water that merge with the God ocean when we merge with the spiritual singularity and experience Christ consciousness. And boarding the consciousness arc is a metaphor that represents tuning into the retrocausality language in a way that helps us merge with the spiritual singularity and float on that God ocean of love. Another archetype that keeps popping up for me are tree references. And at first, I didn't fully understand the significance of trees, but then it dawned on me the tree not only represents life and growth, but it also represents the fractal nature of reality itself.
Do you see it? It's all around you in your everyday life. It is in the waves of the ocean. It is in the nerves of the leaves, in the branches of the trees, in the palm of your own hand. It is the patterns found in this universe. Do you see it now? Take a blank sheet of paper and draw a line from the center to the bottom, just like this one. Now, draw two other lines at a 45-degree angle from the top of the first line, and continue doing the same to all the lines that you draw, like this. And keep going on. And this, my friend, is called the fractal canopy, or the initial stage of it. Now put the pen down, go outside of your room, and look at the nearest tree. What do you see? A mathematical set that exhibits a repeating pattern displayed at every scale. It is not just in this tree. It is found almost everywhere in nature, in the mountain peaks, in the coastal lines, nerves inside you, the human heartbeat. It seems like the universe is following a self-similar code that repeats itself at every scale. In 1997, a group of researchers, West, Brown and Enquist, tried to determine whether the fractal structure of a single tree could predict how an entire forest is placed in the ecosystem. One of the researchers headed to the northwestern part of Costa Rica to a government-allocated rainforest. They measured the fractal structure of the tree by measuring the placement of the branches, the gap between them, and then proceeded to the forest to measure the placement of various trees, big and small, within the forest. They found something quite amazing, for the lack of a better word. The distribution of the branches in the tree they measured almost exactly matched the distribution of the trees in the forest. Suddenly, the work of nature, which was thought to be beyond the grasp of humans, revealed itself in the form of fractals.
If you think about it for a minute, it would be incredibly inefficient to have a set of blueprints for every single stage of increasing size. But if you have a fractal code, a code that says when to branch as you get bigger and bigger, then a very simple genetic code can produce what looks like a complicated organism.
But Mandelbrot is not the first one to notice these self-similar patterns. Remember the Japanese Great Wave? Look at the self-similar waves at the end of the giant wave in this picture. And Hokusai is not the only artist to notice this. It seems like the universe or reality is inherently mathematical in nature, and God, the one who created this universe, is most definitely a mathematician. So next time when you are outside walking or looking at a tree, give yourself a couple of minutes to really be present and register the patterns around you. Maybe the secret of the universe is right in front of us, and we are just too distracted to notice.
So fractals are found everywhere in nature. Even our physical body is made up of countless fractals. Now, we're not our body, we're consciousness or awareness. And, it's not even our consciousness that's inside our body. Our body is inside of our consciousness. We ourselves are holographic consciousness fractals of God. Now, I'm not saying we are God, I'm saying we're a part of God. In a way, you could think of all fractals as being the fingerprint of God. And I think it's possible for universal truths to be encoded in the fractals. That's how I know a song is so much more than just a song. Countless songs are fractals that are encoded with aspects of the whole. And if we can just keep an open mind, it's possible to tune into it through the retrocausality language. Like, it's always there, it's always trying to get our attention. God is always trying to get our attention, but if we're being distracted by negative thoughts or even just too much thinking, it's harder to hear the messages. I think that's why this world is so full of distractions. It wants to keep our mind on the hamster wheel of thinking instead of just being, like just being present in the now. I think our mood can affect our ability to tune into the language too. So like if we're in a bad mood, it can create static that gets in the way of the positive messages coming through the sound waves. But anyways, I want to play 2 songs for you guys so y'all can tune into the retrocausality language and see what I'm talking about. But before I do that, I just want to show you guys some of the transmissions that I got from the retrocausality language with these 2 songs. Because like I can only speak for myself, So the lyrics mention the word when, W-H-E-N, and that got changed to win, W-I-N, which stood out as a retrocausality reference about us having already won the spiritual war. And all winning the spiritual war is it's just returning back to our higher state of consciousness. It's returning back to the higher state of consciousness we were in before we were born and fell into this lower state of consciousness and amnesia. So it's just the time loop looping back around to where we started at. One of the songs also mentions the word old, which changed to mean evolving or growing old spiritually to feel closer to God. So the literal meaning of old disappeared when it got overlaid with the retrocausality language. And then the word river stood out as a consciousness arc reference, which ultimately is talking about the fractal nature of reality. Because remember, like I said earlier, it's like we're drops of water in the river, and we're all flowing through the rapids and the rocks of this life to try to reach the God ocean where we merge with that Christ consciousness. Also, there's a line in the song that mentions the word home, which got decoded to mean the place within our God center where we connect with God and feel at home. And then morning stood out as a time of spiritual awakening. The word life stood out as a metaphor for Christ consciousness. And the word across instantly got changed to a cross, as in like a reference to the Christ consciousness of the spiritual singularity. And it's funny because these 2 songs I'm going to play, they aren't Christian songs. They're just regular songs you'd hear on the radio. But with the line in the song that mentions the word hand morphed into an archetype that represents God's hand, holding hands with God or putting one's life in God's hands. A lot of times the encoded message isn't limited to just one meaning. But the same thing happened with the word feet in the lyrics. It seemed to be talking about how we're all kind of like God's feet or foot soldiers. And guys, I'm not saying this from an egotistical place. We're all God's feet, both metaphorically and also I would say in a literal sense too. I mean, if we're holographic consciousness fractals of God, then that means each piece contains the whole. But the word on got transmitted to mean turning your mind on to see the spiritual singularity and Christ consciousness is real. And just like in so many other songs, the word in stood out as guidance telling us to go inside our heart, within our God center, instead of focusing on the quote unquote external material world. And the words gone and go got decoded to mean leaving a lower state of consciousness to merge with the spiritual singularity. And there's even a line that says, quote, "Oh, simple thing, where have you gone?" unquote. That changed into a question about whether or not one has made the choice to leave this lower state of consciousness and merge with the spiritual singularity. Basically, that line was saying, open up your mind and simply ask yourself, where have you gone? Have you discovered where you go to leave this lower state of consciousness and go into a higher state of consciousness? And I'm not going to decode everything in these songs, but the word come changed to mean arriving at a higher state of consciousness when we merge with the spiritual singularity. And then the words empty land stood out as a metaphor for the lower state of consciousness that dominates the collective consciousness, aka what humans call Earth. Guys, there's nothing left for us here. It's an empty land. But it's only once we evolve to a certain point that we can see that this old Earth is void of anything that can truly make us happy, because it's rooted in a lie. It's rooted in the materialism paradigm, and anything that's based in that paradigm might make you happy short term if you're lucky, but we're not going to find long-term happiness in this empty land. And if you're basing your ability to be happy on the actions of another person, then you're always going to end up disappointed in the end. Like you're going to end up disappointed. You have to go within yourself to connect with God, because God is the only consistent thing that can truly make us happy. I mean, you could live 1,000 years in the materialism paradigm searching for happiness and you'd never find it. So stop searching for it. Go within yourself instead. I mean, for your own sanity, because that's what this world has turned into. It's an entire population that's driven themselves insane by searching for something outside of themselves that can never be found. No one can make you happy, and you're not supposed to fit in here. This is an empty land, and when the pain gets bad enough, you'll figure out a way to leave this lower collective consciousness. And I'm almost done decoding. Then I'll play these two songs. There's a line that mentions the word down, which stood out to mean pulling God's love down from the spiritual realm to enter your heart. The word fall got decoded to mean Christ consciousness, love falling down from the spiritual realm to enter your heart. And then there's a line in one of the songs that says, quote, "Time won't ever steal my soul," unquote. Now that got decoded by the retrocausality language to mean human linear concepts of time won't ever hide the true nature of my timeless soul. So for me, this was talking about how we need to stay present in the here and now, because it's only in the here and now that you can tune in to God and find real peace. And constantly thinking about the past or the future takes us out of being able to focus on God's now. And I really think being obsessed with time, or like being obsessed with the past or the future, is kind of like being in a state of hypnosis. And I get it, like it's hard. I struggle with thinking too much too. But the more I practice being mindful, the easier it's becoming for me to stop thinking all the time. Real quick, the homophone here, H-E-R-E and H-E-A-R, took on multiple meanings at the same time. So it's about being in the here and now, so like quieting our mind chatter. And it also took on an additional meaning of hearing that God is here with you. And then the word dreaming got decoded as a reference to the dreamlike nature of God's creation. And this all goes back to the whole fractal thing too. But I'm not going to go into detail about dreaming just because I don't want this video to be too long. But I would say if you're interested in like a more detailed explanation, just watch my video called The Singularity and the Nature of Reality. And I'll put a link in the description below. But basically, that song line that mentions dreaming was talking about how we're like tiny dreamers that are all part of the one big dreamer, which is God. And there's so many different ways to say the same thing, whether we're talking about a dream, a river, or a tree archetype. It's all pointing to the same thing. Now, the last thing I want to decode in the second song is the word tree. Tree stood out as a reference to life and growth, but it also stood out as a reference to the holographic fractal nature of reality. The retrocausality language conveyed to me that we're kind of like the branches of a tree, and God is like the trunk of the tree that we're all connected to. Real quick, watch this 1-minute clip.
Look at a fern leaf. It is made out of smaller and smaller copies of itself. The same is true for Romanesco broccoli. The branching patterns of trees follow this principle, as do the courses of rivers. Lightning spreads into smaller and smaller branches, each sharing the same features as the main bolt. But also man-made structures organize themselves into fractal patterns without us actually planning them this way. Here is a map of all the roads leading to Rome, and a map of the internet. It's especially fascinating that even your own body shows many fractal characteristics. Thanks to its fractal structure, your lungs have a surface area of over 100 square meters, enabling them to efficiently absorb oxygen. This oxygen is then transported through your fractal bloodstream into your brain, in which the neurons are interconnected fractally. Every thought you think, even right now at this very moment, is a cascade of electric impulses traveling through the fractal network in your brain. This is a simulation of dark matter in our universe. The visible section is 10 million light years across. Even on these scales, you can find the same fractal branching patterns as in the neurons of your brain, in rivers, or in lightning. All this complexity is based on simple feedback processes and on formulas like the Mandelbrot set.
So, like I said earlier, our body is literally composed of fractals. And on a soul level, because we're not our body, on a soul level, we're holographic consciousness fractals of God, branches on a tree. So I just wanted to show that quick clip because I think it relates to the songs I'm going to play. Alright, so I'm going to play these two songs now. Keep in mind the retrocausality language. It's trying to describe the indescribable, so it may not always use what we consider to be proper grammar. And the language uses music to reflect the evolution of each person's unique soul journey. So that's how two people listening to the same song can hear different messages. But if you're not already, just make sure you're able to look at the screen. That way you can see the lyric changes I highlighted as you're listening to the music. So y'all can see what I mean with the retrocausality codes. And keep in mind too, the retrocausality language will never violate anyone's free will and force them to hear the messages. So it's up to us to tune into it. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by slowing down and focusing on God. That's the only thing you need to focus on as you're listening to the music. There's no need to overthink and try to dissect every word. So just take a moment to clear your mind of all the distracting thoughts and just be present and just focus on God's love. And really ask yourself, God, if you could send me a message or a sign through this song, what would you want to tell me about?
All I waited for was a chance to make you understand and tell you these forgotten truths you never thought were real. And if the world should turn its back, you know that I'm still here. Time won't ever steal my soul. And we're not broken, so please come home. Morning comes and life moves on. And when it changed, you didn't know you belong. And I still catch you when you fall through a past that steals your sleep. And scrawl these words upon your wall, remind you to believe. Time won't ever steal my soul. We're not broken, so please come home. And if the world has worn you down, and I'll be waiting knew the pathway like the back of my hand. I felt the earth beneath my feet, sat by the river and it made me complete. Oh, simple thing, where have you gone? I'm getting old and I need something to rely on. So tell me when you're gonna let me in. I'm getting tired and I need somewhere to begin.